So nowadays, your Dynamics 365 environment is much more than just your Dynamics 365 environment. A lot of times you have technicians, you have other people out in the field who maybe need to interact with the application in different ways. Or maybe you have a SharePoint list that you want to be able to handle a custom approval process. Maybe you need to have a record inside Dynamics 365 that once something happens needs to be approved by somebody outside of your organization, or maybe just even outside of the context of Dynamics 365. It's becoming more and more of bridging that gap with the application itself and line of business applications. And so that brings up a whole new set of challenges sometimes. How do you take these third-party applications and bring them in a way that you can still utilize and automate the processes inside the application, but still handle this approval process or these other elements that really need to take place outside of the context of Dynamics 365. And there's been a lot of advances with the new app modules that we've talked about in previous lessons or previous modules, but there's also been a lot of advances with some of the supporting technologies that really allow you to create non-code based solutions that connect and integrate with your Dynamics 365 solutions. And that's one of the things that we want to talk about a little bit in this module. Now, before we get too far in depth, one thing to remember is we are going to talk a little bit about Power Apps and the Common Data Service and Microsoft Flow as a method to be able to go out and just integrate your application. Now, we're not going to go into all of these in a ton of detail. There's actually going to be another course or a future course release that'll focus specifically on Power Apps and designing the apps inside the application, connecting to the Common Data Service and using that to facilitate between maybe your operations modules and your Dynamics 365 modules, and then using Flow to enhance and trigger some of that flow functionality through Power Apps and some of those items. But I do want to focus a little bit on how Flow actually will be able to be used to supplement your services. And so maybe using Flow to initiate an approval process and now bring stuff back into Dynamics 365 and initiate a business process flow. So we're just going to do a quick little overview of Power Apps, what Power Apps is, what the Common Data Service is, how the Common Data Service acts and functions today, and then really get into Microsoft Flow and how Flow can be used to supplement that. We'll talk a little bit on how you can connect to your Dynamics 365 environment using Flow and what some of the options are available for creating records, updating records, querying some of the data sets so you have kind of an idea on what's available from that standpoint. And then we'll just talk about some of the different scenarios where you could use Flow in conjunction with Dynamics 365 to create kind of those automated business processes that are expanding and going above and beyond just business processes that exist solely inside Dynamics 365. There's a lot of different ways that if I want to connect or surface social information inside Dynamics 365, there's a lot of different ways I could do that. We talked a little bit about Flow in a previous module. You could write your own kind of social profiles and connect to individual items maybe through Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or something in that nature. One of the easiest ways would be through a social engagement subscription. And the advantage to using social engagement with Dynamics 365 is there's already kind of a built-in interaction or integration between the two applications. And so you do have the capabilities if you're building search topics to watch your competitors and you're evaluating what people are saying about your competitors through social engagement, you would now have the capabilities to take that information and surface it inside Dynamics 365, whether it's at a dashboard level or even at a form level. So if I have a competitor that I'm tracking in the application, I could take some of the social information and I could associate it with that competitor form inside Dynamics 365. The other example or the other option with that would be you can create all these different search topics around monitoring what people are saying, checking their sentiment about your overall products and brands, monitoring social networking, after marketing campaigns, any of these other types of different situations, and they can all be consumed through what are called widgets inside social engagement. Well, there's already a platform in place that allows you to connect these widgets directly to your Dynamics 365 implementation. And from there, we could even take that one step further and now start to streamline the process of actually bringing in leads automatically from that application. And so that's part of the reason I wanted to talk about social engagement specifically, because this gives us the capabilities to see exactly how this record creation framework works. And then we'll show you how it works within the context of social engagement to Dynamics 365. But then from there, we'll show you how to build in considerations that you want to look at as you're moving forward to just kind of consume it at that point when you're going through. And so from a CRM perspective or from a Dynamics 365 perspective, I could use this information from social engagement to create cases based upon negative posts, to create cases coming directly from a customer. I could actually use this to generate leads. So I could create kind of a lead to an opportunity sales process. And I could automatically look and associate this with leads that are already in place. The framework is there. It's just a matter of providing those two connection points between the two applications. So first and foremost, let's look at kind of the two tiers. So the first tier is exposing social engagement information inside Dynamics 365. So if I'm in Dynamics 365 and I want to connect to my social engagement subscription to surface those as part of dashboards, I can do that. Now again, you have to have a social engagement subscription in order to be able to configure this element. But if I go into settings and I go into administration, I'll see Microsoft Social Engagement configuration. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And it's going to just tell me, hey, are you sure that you want to do this? That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. Then it's going to ask me what social engagement subscription I want to work with. So in this case, I just drop down. And again, social engagement subscription has to be tied to the same Office 365 subscription that your Dynamics 365 instance is tied to. And as long as that is the case, once you go in and look at it, it'll go ahead and drop that down. You can go ahead and hit select. And then this will enable the social engagement interaction inside the application. Now, if at any point, if you want to just kind of start over, or you don't necessarily want to have that integration enabled, you do have the ability to reset social insights, and that'll just kind of remove everything that you've done to this point, and then just kind of reset the system from there. But in order to facilitate how you want to work through, you just have to enable the social engagement inside the application. So there's two tiers that I can use from a social engagement perspective. The first one is more at a dashboard level, so I'm looking at it from kind of a global perspective. And the second one is looking at it more from a forms perspective. And there are different configurations based upon what it is that you're looking to accomplish. So let's first look at exposing some of the social engagement information through a dashboard. So I'm going to go into settings, and I'm going to go into customizations, and I'm going to go in and customize the system. And I'm going to just go into dashboards, and I'm going to just pick any, I can create a new dashboard, or I can pick any existing dashboard that I want, but I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to customize one of the dashboards to include some of the social engagement content in it. So give it just a sec to load up here. And I'll click on dashboards. And now in this case, I'm going to go ahead and I'll just pick any one of these dashboards. We'll just go ahead and show, actually I'll just create a new dashboard here real quick. Let's create a standard dashboard. Do the 2-column one. Call this sample social. Now you'll notice that by enabling social engagement interaction, I now have a social insights option. So when I go into insert social insights, this will now connect me to my search or to my social engagement. Now I can do one of two situations. I can associate this with a search topic or with a search topic category. These are different options for searching inside social engagement when you want to search specific posts. Now for our perspective, we're going to focus specifically on the search topic. Now again, remember these are search topics that have already been created inside social engagement. So I'm going to pick a search topic. I'm then going to go ahead and pick what specific search topic I want to use. So again, it gives me the capabilities to either create a search topic or I can just kind of pick one. I will go ahead and pick one for this particular scenario. So I'll choose CRM and I'll hit next. Then it's going to bring me into what are called social engagement widgets. So these are the different view widgets that I can associate with this item. So in this case, I can see that I have kind of an analytics summary, which gives me a bunch of different options, but I have just different options that I can choose based upon languages, trends. These are just different visualization elements that I can use based upon how I want to work with it. I then go ahead and hit my add, and I could add additional ones. So if there were specific ones that I wanted to bring in based upon different items, I could just add multiple items into this. The other option would be, once I'm done with this, I could hit finish, and then I could just add some of these elements into individual areas as well. But once I save and then publish this dashboard, now these individualized components are all going to show up inside the application and be displayed for everybody to see. And so that's the dashboard perspective. From a dashboard standpoint, you set everything up, you save and publish, and then once you navigate to the dashboard, you'll see your social elements piece. If you want to be more targeted, maybe you want to, maybe you have a customer or maybe you have a competitor and you've created social, through social engagement, you've created search topics that look specifically for items about that particular competitor. Now you could make more kind of targeted situations in regards to social engagement by adding the social engagement widgets to like an account form or a contact form or a competitor form. And what's nice about this is now I can customize that from within inside the application, whereas when I open up a specific account, I can associate that account with a specific search topic. So for example, if I wanted to enable this to use on the account record, I would now go ahead and go into the account entity, go into forms. Then I would pick the form that I wanted to customize. So in this case, I'll just go to the account form. And open that up. And I'm just going to add, just for simplistic purposes, I'm going to just add a new tab. So I'll just add kind of a one-column tab onto this form. I'm going to double-click on this tab and just call this social info. Then I'll go ahead and click on OK. Now, within this section, I am going to add social insights. So I'm going to click on social insights, and I'm just going to add the social insight information into this option. I'm going to choose to display the label on the form. I'm going to make it visible by default. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to maybe make this like 12 columns or so big, just to really have it kind of fill up the page. And then I'll go ahead and click on OK. Now, you'll notice that in here, I don't have to do anything else. Like we did with the dashboards where I had to go in and really associate it with the search topics, I don't have to do that here because this will be done on kind of an individualized record by record basis. So now what I'm going to do is once I've configured it on the form, now I'm going to go ahead and save my form, then publish it. And then once my customizations have been published, now I can go out to an account record and then I can basically enable this functionality. So give it just a second to finish publishing, and then we'll go out to the account entity and we'll open up an account record. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of here. Close out of here. I'll go into sales and accounts. Now in this case, I'm just going to open up any account that I might have, so we'll go ahead and just open up this ADatum. And then if I scroll down, I will see my social info. And here it says configure social insights. And so this is where you would have to have the appropriate search topics, created. So I would probably have a search topic associated with ADatum Corporation so I could facilitate that. In this case, I'll go ahead and I'll configure social insights, and it'll walk me through that exact same wizard that we saw when we were doing the dashboard. I'll associate it with a search topic. I'll pick the search topic that I want to associate it with, which in this case, we'll just kind of pick one of the sample ones. And then I'll walk through my widget process again. So what specific widgets do I want to have? In this case, I just want to have the analytics summary. I'll go ahead and hit finish. And now it's going to populate that inside the application. It'll load my analytics, and I can actually see that social engagement information directly from here. Now, I have to be a social engagement user. So this has to be somebody inside the organization that does have access to social engagement. If they don't have access to social engagement, they just won't see this piece. It'll just be kind of displayed with no information inside of it. And that's all by intent. That's where you might want to just have the social engagement piece minimized. That way people who don't have access to social engagement wouldn't see it. From within here, I can re-go in and I can change the visuals if I want to. I also have the capabilities to change or edit the search topic. So if I ever want to add additional criteria to this, I can modify this. But this really now is a great situation that from an account perspective or a competitor perspective, I can now take these real targeted search topics that we've created inside social engagement, and I can now surface them directly inside here and then utilize them moving forward. So up until now, we've looked at the piece of taking the information that's there inside social engagement and surfacing it inside Dynamics 365, whether that's through a form or whether that's through a widget. What we haven't necessarily talked about is how do I take information that's in social engagement and actually physically do something inside Dynamics 365. For example, create a lead or create a case, or take that information, escalate it to a point where a record can actually be created inside the application. And that's what I want to kind of talk about now is how do we configure not only social engagement to talk to Dynamics 365, but how do we take Dynamics 365 and build these rules to be able to consume what it is that we want to do. And so it really comes down into kind of three different layers. There's the connection standpoint. So we have to establish a connection to the Dynamics 365 organization. Now, the other thing to remember when you start talking about connecting social engagement and connecting Dynamics 365, from a social engagement standpoint, you do have to have an enterprise license. So there's two different types of licenses for social engagement. There's more of a professional license and an enterprise license. Professional will let you do a lot of what the application allows, but it will not allow you to establish a connection from social engagement to Dynamics 365. So that actually has to be done first through an enterprise license. So you're basically going to connect the two environments together. Then you're going to configure the integration. So then what you're going to do is inside social engagement, you're going to go up and define what specific items you want to connect to Dynamics 365. So I want to be able to create cases. I want to be able to create leads. And you're going to determine and define the rules in which those particular record types are going to get created inside the application. And then you're going to go into Dynamics 365 and you're going to consume that, and you're going to take the information that's coming into there and you're actually going to create and configure how to define those records in the application. And we're going to show you a complete end-to-end demo on this as well, but let's just kind of summarize it at a high level first. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to go into social engagement and you have to establish that connection to your Dynamics 365 environment, and you then have to configure the entities that you want to create, and you have to define what specific attributes in those entities you want to populate inside your Dynamics 365 subscription. Then you're going to go in and you're going to define how that's going to work. So you're going to go into your items and you're going to determine what the entities are. So after you've configured your entities, they could be custom entities, they could be cases or leads, which are done by default. You will then go ahead and map the individual fields. So that'll then go ahead and create the items that you want to work with and successfully submit those posts from an automation standpoint. So there's really two ways you can do this when you start linking this information to Dynamics 365. You can do it manually or you can do it automatically. The automatic and the manual, you still have to establish the connection and what type of entity you want to create inside the application. Then you're going to go in and you are going to go into Dynamics 365 and you are going to configure what are called the automatic record and creation and update rules. And what I want to do in here is I want to spend a little bit more time after we go through the initial social engagement configuration talking about specifically what that looks like inside Dynamics 365. In the last demonstration, we showed you how these records can be created, inside from a context of using social engagement. But really this record creation framework, or this ability to create and update records in the application, extends far and above and beyond that. There's actually a developer framework that you can use to auto-create stuff coming in from Twitter or different items automatically. But realistically, if I had an email that came into a queue and I wanted to create a case based upon that email, I could do that. Or if somebody creates a task or a phone call or some type of service activity, or really any activity type inside Dynamics 365, I can use that as a facilitation to initiate this record creation option. So a new email comes in, I specify where the email's coming, what queue it's coming into, and now I can create records inside the application. Now what's cool about this is I have the ability, when I'm creating these records, I can specify really what type of record I want it to create. There's lots of options around, obviously, the case and the lead entity, but I also would have the capabilities to go in and create, a custom record or a custom entity. And I could use that based upon a single activity. So one activity that's coming in could create multiple different records inside the application using this record creation and update rules inside Dynamics 365. Now, what's neat about this is there's a lot of different conditions, and you'll see this when we come into the application. I can look at it to determine whether or not they have an existing support contract with us, if I want to create a case within the application, but I also could determine, if I just get a standardized message that comes in and I don't have a lead or an item inside the system, I would have the ability to go in and automatically have it create contacts and cases inside the application. Now, it works in conjunction with your personal options. So if you think about how the automatic record creation works inside Dynamics 365, there's an option to automatically create records from unknown contacts or unknown leads inside the system. So when you get a message from somebody, you could have it auto create a contact or a lead. Using that same type of functionality, I can also have it auto-create a case within the application itself. But it works in conjunction. So for example, if I have the option inside my Dynamics 365 set to automatically create records or create a lead, and I get a message that says create case from, or I get a message that comes in and I've chosen to create a case from an unknown sender, I'm going to have a contact and a case that's automatically going to get created in the system because I've told the system at a user level I want to create that contact in the system, and I've told it at an application level I want to create that case in the system. Now, if I have automatically create a lead come into the application, but I do not have create a case selected, then nothing's really going to happen. It's not going to create the lead or create any of that situation. If I have create contact selected and I have create a case selected, then I'm going to create both the contact and the case. Or if I'm just creating the contact but not the case, then I can have just the contact selected. So part of this, you'll see this in the demo, works in conjunction with the individual options that you have. Now, these case creation and record update rules are nice because they provide you with that extra level of flexibility to determine how these records should be created inside the app. So now we're going to create our record creation rules. So we're going to actually go into settings, and then we're going to go into service management. And underneath service management, we'll see our automatic record creation and update rules. And so this is where we can now start to really define how we want to create records inside Dynamics 365 automatically. And so this is where if you have users who are going to be, sending emails to a queue, if you have situations where items are going to be surfacing through social data, social engagement, this is where you, or even if you wanted to use Flow to create some, activity records inside the application, this is where you could really now start to consume those activities and do something with them in the context of the application and start creating records inside the Dynamics 365 automatically. So by going in and clicking on New, this is going to open up the record creation rule. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can facilitate this. Now, I'm going to just go ahead and call this sample. So the first thing you'll see is the source type. So there's options around emails, phone calls, basically any activities. So the one that you would see in regards to like social engagement or any social activity would be social activity. So this is going to look at a social activity record that gets created automatically from social engagement. So that's what we've done by kind of that automatic record creation, is it creates a social activity which we now can consume inside the application to facilitate what we want to do moving forward. Now, if this was going to be an email or anything like that, I could now specify what queue maybe that email is coming from if I've routed it from a specific scenario. But in this case, we'll just go ahead and pick social activity. Now, the key thing to remember here is when you're creating these rules, you can only have one rule per source type. So I can only create one social activity rule. Now that's okay, because within the context of the application, I can create multiple kind of creation update rules that would reflect different scenarios. So if I have items coming from Twitter, if I have items coming from Facebook or whatever I've kind of defined, I can create different rules within the context of that are going to work through that. Now, each one of these items has additional items that I can associate based upon what I've chosen. So for example, if I want to only allow cases or leads or whatever the record is that I want to create, if I only want to allow that for private messages or direct messages, I would have the capabilities to do that. Or if I wanted to create records for blocked social profiles, if I have people that I've kind of blocked, just from showing up in different scenarios, I could also create them from there. Otherwise, I can just kind of leave everything the way that I want. Now, from an email perspective, if I just very quickly switch this from an email perspective, I do also have some options around emailing. I could specify creating from unknown senders. We talked a little bit about that kind of at the top of the module, where if I have settings to create these from unknown senders, this will create cases from people that we don't necessarily know who they are. And this works in conjunction with those settings that you set up from your auto creation settings inside your email profile. Whereas if you have it to auto generate contacts and leads, it'll create the lead in the system and then it will create the case associated with that particular item. The other option is it can look to see if there's an entitlement associated with this customer. So it'll only create contracts or only create cases if there is a valid service agreement for that particular person, or we have a contract with that customer. Or we can actually have it look to see if this is associated with a case that's already been resolved. And then depending upon how long ago that case was resolved, we can have it dictate whether or not it should associate it with that specific case or whether it should create a new case in the application. Now in this case, we'll just go with social activity and we'll go ahead and hit save. And then we're going to go in and now we're going to start specifying our creation and update details. So we're going to go into here where it says specify record creation and update, and we're going to click on this to create kind of a new rule. And we'll just call this Twitter. And now we'll save the record real quick. And then once we save the record, that'll enable most of the functionality that we need to kind of start facilitating with options. So now I can specify what my condition is that I want to look at in regards to this particular item. So this is where I can now go into here and I can look at, okay, this is coming from a social activity. I can pick the source of the social activity, so I've got different options in regards to where this is coming from. So this is where I could pick the channel and I could say, okay, if the channel equals, here's my different channels, the channel equals Twitter, this is what I want to do. So within the social activity, because it's coming across from social engagement, it's going to mark it as a Twitter activity. And so as it's coming in from that scenario, we can now, when it creates the social activity, distinguish that it's coming from Twitter and now use that information accordingly. So now from here that I've specified what that is, and now it doesn't necessarily just have to be within that scenario. If you look, I can go into related entities. And so if you start looking at, emails and different situations, you can take into consideration, who sent the email, what account it's coming from, and then if you look at what account it's coming from, you can look at specific details around that. So you really have a lot of additional information. If that post author is an account or a contact, you can look at the account and the contact records that are associated with that information, and now really start to see what specific items you want to go through. And this is where you can build some very detailed type situations around what the specific condition might entail based upon how you want to create this record. So this is where you have a lot of flexibility above and beyond just kind of the standardized if it comes from this scenario. So now I can come in here and I can specify what I want to do in regards to this option. So I can go into now add a step, and I have an option to create a record. So once I create a record, now I can specify what type of record I want to create. Now, typically you hear these associated with, cases and leads, but as you see, I can really create any type of record within the application. And then based upon what I want to pick, I can then go into set properties, and then I can set all the specific fields around how I want to work through these individual situations. Now, this is also where if I'm coming in, from a developer perspective, I could expand some of this information out to extrapolate additional details around the channel properties. And that's where I could feed in information using JSON and different things to really facilitate how this information is coming in, particularly if I was going to build kind of a custom connection to Twitter or something like that. But now I have the ability to really start to take this information as it comes in and now create those records inside the application. So then I could go ahead and say save and close this. And then as I'm done with this particular option, if I wanted to have one for Facebook, I could now create one for Facebook, and I could just kind of establish these in the way that I want. Now you'll notice that there's up and down arrows. As you add these individual conditions and rules, it basically goes through the first situation. Once it finds one that's true, then it stops. So the first one it goes through, if it's coming from Twitter, it's not going to look for any of the other ones. So you do want to make sure that you kind of, particularly if you have some vaguer ones, you want to make sure that you have those down towards the bottom. So the first ones that you have are very specific, and if those don't apply, then it'll start working its way down to eventually where it might find the vague ones in the application. Now I can go ahead and activate this, and then as soon as I start receiving information from social engagement, that information will now populate, and I'll see it directly inside as cases inside Dynamics 365. The need to create records inside Dynamics 365 comes from a lot of different areas. Whether it's coming from a social engagement, whether it's coming from a Twitter, a LinkedIn, whether it's even coming from a third-party application. Maybe it's coming from an Office 365 subscription, basically a contact that's been created. There's a lot of different ways that you might be able to go ahead and facilitate that. Either way, using a combination of the record creation framework to be able to go ahead and auto-create cases, leads, or other custom entities based upon items coming in provides you with a ton of flexibility. Now, the thing to remember is, the data that you already have is already valuable, but by linking it with a social engagement or interacting it with other modules or other application modules just increases the value. It makes it easier and gives you more definitive information that you can use moving forward, and it allows you to take that information and really supplement it in and create automation based upon what you've already captured. So it makes it much easier to react to that information moving forward. And I think that's the bottom line with this module, is looking at ways that how this item's coming in from other systems can be streamlined to provide you with just maximum effectiveness as you're moving forward.